Is it possible to build your own house for the price of an apartment in a block? Is it even realistic, or is it just a marketing gimmick? We decided to check it out in the field, teamed up with experts from Dom Perignon Energy, and together we created a project tailored for these times, a 70 square meter clever oasis. For several episodes you were with us on the construction site, and in the comments and private messages, well, it was just buzzing. You asked about everything from the foundations to the costs, what bothers you, what you like, and what still makes you wonder about this construction system. It's time to check it out. And dear friends, we are here in our esteemed group, and with us, as I always said in the episodes, is our guardian angel, Derek. Since he oversaw the construction and Arxi is with us, you could say he's one of us. The finishing supervisor, because he took over the main work here and made sure that the finishing touches were completed. And we have your questions. We'll try to answer all of them smoothly today. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Let's start. Okay. Wojtas is asking, how long did the entire construction take from breaking ground to the finished house?
We finished it in 3 to 4 months, depending on whether we built it in winter, spring, or summer. We did it at the turn of summer and autumn, so in the end, we managed to put everything together in 3 or 4 months without any major problems.
Exactly. You could say it's fast construction nowadays, because in the past, people used to say that everything had to... Grandpa says, no, it has to rest, no, it has to set, no, it has to get through the winter. Not like this.
You just need to pay attention to the basic structural elements that need to rest, so to speak, and the rest can go on as usual.
The next question is, how much time did we actually spend on the construction, and how much of it was done by professionals? Well, I think it needs to be said that this system was simply commissioned to the team from Dom Perignon Energy. So we were actually the team that wanted to show you how it all looks. From the basics, what you have to deal with on the construction site, just to film it so you can also make a decision. Because everyone is at the stage of choosing whether to build on their own or to do it with a contracted system. That's why we were there, we helped.
Of course, we mainly showed how to do the finishing work. All the finishing work was done by us, and we showed that we can really do it ourselves.
There were a few things we tried for the first time, like tying some reinforcement, making columns, moving walls. Yes, we wanted to present it smoothly with some humor, but it's not really like that.
Electrical work, plumbing, things like that.
Weapons, God forbid, I wouldn't even touch that, because first you need to have the skills, and second, you probably need some kind of certification for all of that. So we don't take on things we don't know about. But if someone wants peace of mind, I think it's nice to have a crew that handles everything from A to Z. The next question is specifically for you, Derek. What mistakes do investors most often make when building on a slab as opposed to not using a slab?
Unlike a traditional foundation, it requires you to know everything at this stage, at least when it comes to things like underfloor sewage. Unlike building a standard foundation where you backfill, pour lean concrete, and everything is set, mistakes can be easily fixed by breaking it up and digging it out. But if you don't connect or check something at the slab stage, then later on, even to make sure the sewage system works properly, it will be a big problem to go back and fix it. That's the first part, and now the second part. This is really about the final elevation of the entire building, because at this stage you can't afford for the slab to be too low or too high in relation to the road or the final land development. The subbase is very important because some people think that, just like with standard strip foundations, you dig out some soil, reach something hard, and build on that. Yes, a slab also requires soil replacement, so there are extra costs too.
Just like this sand.
We've already discussed this. It needs to be compacted, levels checked, and whether or not we do soil replacement, we prefer to check it ourselves. Anyway, you saw it in the video. It was when the crew arrived. It took me 5-10 minutes. They played around with some equipment, took some readings, dropped some weights, and checked the degree of compaction. If it's okay, we can proceed.
All right, I can see here from our set of questions that the next ones are about the kitchen, which sparked a lot of interest here. Doniasti is asking why the exit from the kitchen is designed this way.
In general, the kitchen is open, as everyone can see, and the exit leads to the living room, but I think this is about something else. It's about these doors.
About these doors, which are planned from the kitchen to the pantry. In my opinion, a pantry is something essential. Because honestly, when you have an 8-meter kitchen, all the countertops and all the cabinets underneath are either filled with pots or with some food products. There's always really not enough of that space.
Toasters, sandwich makers.
Yes, but there are air fryers.
Everything too, and you have to put it all somewhere.
Yes, but of course this isn't the only solution, because you can really adapt this project to your needs. These doors can also be on the other side. There are versions of this project where they're not here on the kitchen side, but on the hallway side. They can also be here at the front, you could say from the living room. That's the solution with the doors shifted, and then there's also a different room.
But when it comes to opening the doors, we made doors that open into the living room. That's because the whole area simply becomes one big kitchen. Actually, it's like we would be a bit closed off if the doors opened the other way, because then they'd hit the cabinets and we'd have them blocked. As you said, Brother Rabachi, you can also use sliding doors.
Absolutely.
Joanna also asks how the kitchen works in everyday use. I think that's also referring to what we mentioned earlier. Well, I think that since we actually have more space in the pantry, we automatically have order, we have more space. This equipment doesn't get in our way, so it's better too. Yes, the kitchen is about 8 meters, if I remember correctly, 8 meters.
Theoretically, it's not much, but in my opinion, there's really a lot of countertop space and a lot of room for such a kitchen.
That was also one of the solutions we tried to bring from previous projects, which is making this into a mini island, like a mini island. Yes, it closes this layout, you could say, in a U shape so that we have an additional countertop. It separates the kitchen area from the living room a bit, and honestly, there's more space for everything, and in the kitchen, believe me, space really comes in handy.
We cooked here while filming multiple episodes.
And actually, wait, because I see here that Clara is also asking a question about the kitchen. How does a kitchen work without an oven and a dishwasher? Oh,
The dishwasher is here, yes.
well, we were a bit rushed with the recordings, so not everything could be set up properly.
Kitchen options are vast. You can replace a cabinet with a dishwasher or move it as you like. It depends on your taste and how you want to arrange your kitchen. And the second topic was the oven.
It was about the oven. Why wasn't there one? Well,
We went with air fryers because we record a lot of episodes and we use air fryers ourselves. Honestly, I have an oven at home and I almost never use it. I don't know.
Derek, you have an air fryer, you know?
I have an oven with an air fryer and now only make pizza in it.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm saying.
That if you have the biggest air fryer, you can even cut it. Somehow the pizza will fit in the air fryer. And we just went with this, I would say, more modern approach. When it comes to how much and what I cook, because if someone loves to bake, I don't know, 2 trays of cake, then the oven will probably be more useful for me.
Okay, Coprolity is now asking what the roof construction looked like. Prefabricated trusses or traditional rafters?
Traditional rafters were not an option in this case. We went with a quick option using a prefabricated roof, which came with ready-made gables, so there was no need to build the gables traditionally. Besides, thanks to that, as you saw, we were able to arrange the entire attic and see how it looks. And that's exactly why I remembered about the prefabricated roof truss already at the design stage. We paid attention to making sure there was free space there, so we went for a quick solution. As you know, the whole thing took maybe 2.5 hours.
It's amazing that it went that way. We were there in the morning and by afternoon it was done.
Actually, that's the advantage in terms of time and technology, because if all the wood had arrived for a traditional roof truss, cutting, checking and installing it would probably have taken twice as long, if not spread over 2 working days.
And the costs are fairly comparable.
With these kinds of structures, everything is comparable, because here you really only have the price for the material and the labor for assembly, but it's done by one company that brings everything, does it all quickly, and then leaves. Here you need to divide the costs between the doctor and carpenter, since both must stay in contact. For example, just to set up the gutters or to determine some heights, to agree on the details.
I've always wondered, especially with prefabricated things, whether the quality level isn't actually better in the factory where there's more quality control than, for example, a roofer who might just be someone from a beer stand. Or you know what?
On one hand, yes, but on the other hand, definitely. The advantage is that the wood is already dried. It's wood that has already gone through its whole process and is incorporated into other elements. It's much lighter because, as you saw, the cross sections of these beams aren't as big as with a traditional roof truss, but it's lighter. Yes, the whole structure is lighter, but because it's tied together, it's technologically the same.
Listen, okay? Justina is asking, what percentage of the budget went to the interior? Remember, every stage is summarized somewhere, both the construction and the finishing. There's a board at the end so you can just play each episode and see for yourself. How much did the bedroom cost? How much did it cost? But I think everything together cost about 55,000. I'd say between 55 and 60. Remember one thing, that here we were going for, let's say, cheaper solutions, as cheap as possible for the quality. So we wanted to find a golden mean. people can actually make kitchens at home that are worth as much as our entire interior finishing. That's about 15 or 20% of the total, but everyone has to decide for themselves. Of course, if you have bigger budgets, go ahead and use them. We wanted to show how you can make something cool on a low budget, something that looks good and works, while still maintaining quality. Pavel asks, why didn't you make the pins together with the ring? Was it to save money or was it a mistake? I think what he means is
That we poured it in 2 stages.
that we poured it in 2 stages, let me put it that way.
Of course, you can do it so that you pour the anchors together with the ring beams. That's not a problem. Or you can do it separately. In our case, I remember the crew wanted to split it up because they weren't completely sure. We didn't want to repeat a mistake twice, like having some elements not properly vibrated, so we went along with them and split it into 2 stages. It cost us extra, mainly because we had to pay again for the concrete pump truck. Sometimes the expense is worth it.
Exactly, but those dowels, as far as I remember, had to be very well secured, because the buoyancy of the concrete that's poured in can simply cause those boards, well, a kind of...
Exactly, that was the main point, because if they were to spread apart, everything would float out of the ring in a moment. So we did it in 2 steps, making sure the dowels were already ready.
If it broke apart and 2 concrete mixers were waiting to make the ring and all that, then what would we... Well, then we wouldn't... Well, the material would just go back to...
It doesn't work that way. For example, if there was a leak in a dowel and it couldn't be tied due to the concrete pressure from the rings and nearby dowels, well, then we would actually have to get rid of everything that was poured into the formwork, and that would mean we'd have to clean the reinforcement, clean the formwork, clean the wall where it was set up. It would be double the work. Again, you have to be careful because there would be a significant loss of material in the form of concrete and the trip.
Basically, splitting it into 2 was the right decision.
If you're unsure, I'd rather do it in 2 steps now than risk having to backtrack later. 2 steps from here.
And it's always worth listening to someone wise. Mihu asks how the prefabricated roof connected with the foundation slab.
How the prefabricated roof was connected.
With the foundation slab?
Starting from the top, connectors to the reinforced concrete ring beam. The ring beam was connected to the column using reinforcement, which went into the foundation slab.
Well, I hope that Michu, you are satisfied with this answer. Because I'm not technically knowledgeable and Darek probably knows what he's talking about, right?
I guess so, apparently.
And the next question is, which solution surprised you the most in a positive way after you moved in?
The layout of the rooms here is really well planned, in my opinion. For 70 square meters, the space actually feels much bigger. Everyone who visits asks about the square meters, and we've had several specialists, electricians and plumbers remark, wow, how many square meters is this? It's 70. That it really looks bigger than it is.
Yes, once.
A kitchen living room combo creates that spacious feel.
Because if we had maybe closed it off, it would be maybe it would look different visually. Large terrace windows here, also by the dining area, give that sense of space. We have the kitchen here.
We have 3 rooms, the living room, kitchen, and 3 others. We turned 1 into a bedroom, another into a child's room, and the 3rd into an office. Really for work, so you can see that on 70 square meters we're able to fit everything. But the goal of our project was to make it so that these walls could be moved around a bit.
For example, as you said, you can turn the pantry into a boiler room, or you can move the pantry and make a bigger wardrobe.
And it was the same with the rooms, because you can combine them, just knock down the wall and make 1 bigger room. If you want to have 2, for example, because the family is smaller, that's fine too. The next questions are from Dragunov. Dragunov, what do you use to heat your house and how does it work? It's not coal, it's not gas, it's not a heat pump. We went with electricity. Yes, we chose electricity. For many people, electric heating is still associated with high bills, high costs, and so on and so on.
Remember, the house is energy efficient, meeting new Polish standards. It requires proper parameters for windows, walls, insulation, and stays warm. So heating up such a space, which also isn't that big here because you don't have open areas, electric heating will do the job just fine. There's no need for the cost of radiators. A radiator is useful in a wet room like a bathroom, and it can also be electric. With this kind of setup for up to 100 square meters like here, I think the best solution is actually heating cables or heating mats, skipping the heat pump, which causes significant costs. And instead, you could easily put photovoltaic panels on the roof up to 7-8 kilowatts, and the annual bills would be really nice.
Dark, I wanted to say that Derek, your namesake, wrote this, Dark.
Maybe I wrote it then.
What about ventilation? Do you have a heat recovery unit, gravity ventilation, or something else?
We don't have anything else. We chose a heat recovery unit.
Those were the long ducts.
long ducts installed in the attic, which you can't see, that bring in fresh air and heat it from the outside and expel the used air outside. I remember we used to talk about this gravity ventilation. That's how it was in old houses, in old apartment blocks back in the 80s and 90s. Well, now it wouldn't really work anymore because everything is so airtight now. Gravity ventilation alone wouldn't work. There wouldn't be that airflow.
And the windows are more airtight.
It's just that airtight. It's not like before when you put your hand up and felt a draft, and that's when it worked. And that was the part that made the gravity system work, and it functioned. And we've encountered this more than once, even in the DPE. While building a house, if someone wanted to give up on the recuperation system at any stage, we would persuade them otherwise. For the simple reason that gravity without recuperation doesn't really exist. And in fact, we had an example where gravity stopped working because everything was airtight. There were different systems in place there. We would have to damage the windows, damage them in such a way as to install air vents in the windows to create any kind of air movement in the house.
But what was the result? That mold simply appeared that the moisture was accumulating.
Moisture was accumulating in the corners, mold was noticeable. You could just feel that there was no ventilation at all in any of the rooms.
Here, Camilla is asking what thickness of styrofoam you used and what it was glued with.
We used 20 centimeters of graphite styrofoam. I think it was lambda 00032. As far as I remember, the differences between 20, 25, and 30 centimeters aren't that significant anymore.
I wanted to ask if at some point the difference becomes unnoticeable or barely noticeable.
If you use 40, for example,
But between 40 and 30, that's a difference, just a few microns, so really there isn't any difference. 20 is perfectly optimal to meet all the requirements we currently have on the market.
so just put up some styrofoam.
Of course, yes, it can be done with glue, it can be done with foam, the wall has to be even anyway, and then we have to level the styrofoam exactly.
I remember leveling.
But it has to be because exactly if someone did it with foam, then you don't have that adjustment. As for the level, really, when it's on adhesive, it can be very uneven, so it might be a bit uneven. That's what leveling is for, so that the surface is even afterward and ready for adhesive. And for mesh, actually, it's the leveling layer that evens everything out and makes sure there are no waves or marks showing through on the plaster.
All right, and the next question is, which stage of construction was the most difficult and why? Well, here we have, you could say, a question for us and for Darek, or actually, is it a question for someone else or for Darek? After building 1,000 houses, does anything still affect you, or is there a part of construction that remains especially meaningful to you?
The question wasn't about what moves me, but which stage was hardest.
Right, but I think...
Was the most difficult for me or for us? For our company, it's always that stage, the last one, when all the teams actually come together in one place. Because like here, there was one company that, for example, put up the walls, built the roof, and installed the windows. But suddenly there's this turning point when the roof is already covered, and then the electrician comes in, the installer comes in, the plasterer comes in, the heating installer, the floor layer. When it comes to all the finishing work, that's where there's the most room for mistakes and the most things happening in one place. And that's the point you really always have to keep an eye on, and it determines how the whole construction is perceived in the end.
My dear friends, as the coffee runs out, the questions are ending too. And to finish, here's a question. What would you do differently today, having this experience?
I would definitely start with the door, the one to the storage room here. I would move it a bit more, about 20 centimeters deeper into the kitchen, because then when you enter the storage room, I could easily put some shelves on the left side.
Honestly, I thought Archie had already used that storage room to its maximum potential, and now he's saying he wants to put in even more shelves to fit even more stuff.
And since we're already in this room, honestly, I would move the ventilation system upstairs. Then we would actually have even more space.
Of course, it takes up a lot of space there, but you can do it, right, Darek? You could, for example, put the ventilation system in the attic.
It's so high that only 70 cmi separates it from the target place Archie mentioned upstairs. We can access it, we just need to insulate the ventilation unit, and that's it.
I was thinking yes on my part about this window because, as we said, it's built in here, but on the other hand, we have an exit to the garden here. And sometimes it would also work well here as a terrace door. Necessary or not, we did it this way because this is the dining room and it's simply filled with chairs, so we decided that no one would be moving here, especially since the main exit to the garden is not far from here. And possibly, if I were to nitpick, maybe this window here could be changed to one that opens.
I'll defend this window. It's a fixed window which you don't appreciate. It's one of the smallest windows that simply can't be opened, especially in the dining area.
So, will we see each other in the next episodes? Thanks, Darek, for being with us, for your answers, and see you next time. Thanks.